Welcome to GNN. For all of you out there that are too busy to read the news, here are some of the headlines. On the 9th of August, an election in Belarus was held. Reports spoke of fraud on the polls as well as other violations. It was even labeled as neither free or fair by Angela Merkel last week. It resulted in protests which then escalated. Macron and Merkel met this last week over the fear of a second Ukraine crisis. They hope that with the help of the EU they can mediate the current situation in Belarus. For one, the EU does not accept the results of the election due to the meddling of Russia. Speaking about America, the DNC took place last week. DNC stands for the Democratic Nomination Campaign or something. Well, there have been a lot of ups and downs. There have been a lot of tacky attempts of creating a crowd through Zoom chats. A lot of the guest speakers being, well, I wasn't a huge fan of it. And a lot tried to create a unity and speaking of a miracle and try to mobilize the people. Even Bloomberg had a take on the situation. He tried to explain the Trump campaign or the Trump effects on the country as he would be speaking to children in a primary school. It was very sad, but they're trying. Give them that. Also related to that, currently Biden is leading in the polls, and his vice president that he put, Kamala Harris, who he put on the ticket, she looks pretty promising, though I do wish they would have gone for Cortez. She is way more, she has way more spike, I suppose you would say. Well, I'm looking forward for her campaign in 4 to 8 years. I hope she goes for it. She should. Well, speaking about Trump, last week Steve Bannon was arrested. You all remember him? He's a former Trump campaign manager from 4 years ago. Well, it turned out that he and a couple other guys created a FundMe campaign called We Build the Wall in order to augment the money Trump needs to actually build the wall. You recall that was supposed to work for 5 billion, then it became 10, then 15, then 25, then 45. Well, it might be important for us all to go back to see what we actually currently have on the southern border, right? Before we go into the story furthermore. The wall itself, covering the entire east to west coast along the Mexican border, was supposed to be paid by the Mexican. It was supposed to be high and unscalable. It was supposed to be needed, and thus he also declared a national emergency in order to get the money. Well, in order to get his hands on the money, he managed to get 5 billion from Congress. He got 10 billion from the Pentagon. The Pentagon was sitting on some cash for not so much needed project as renovating schools, childcare for military families. Nobody needs that. A water wall is way more important according to Trump supporters in the news. Well, so thought Steve Bannon and his friends, so they created said campaign. And it turns out that from the 25 million they got, well, he took 1 million, paid for some of his own personal expenses, a trip here, something there. It's all fine. I mean, nobody expected anything else apart from the Trump supporters. So he and 3 others been arrested. On the funny part there, he was arrested on his yacht by the Postal Service and the Coast Guards. Who knew they can do that? Now, while speaking about the wall, it might be important to know to see how far they have actually gotten over the last 4 years. I mean, we all remember that it was a major promise of him 4 years ago to build that thing. Well, let's see what happened. There was a show, like a beauty pageant in the desert, where companies could present walls, how they would want to build them, and then it was chosen which one will be built. Well, the wall that was currently being built, that has won the process, was by a company, the Fisher Company or something, or Fisher's Contractors, in a very interesting way. Namely, the son of the company's whole creator went on Fox News quite frequently, over a dozen times, flirted with the moderators and showed his allegiance to Trump. Oh well, and we all know what Trump sees, he buys. So he shortlisted him on the contract. Interestingly enough, it was against the Homeland Security and all the other um, government agencies because the suggested wall does not met any of the criteria required. Though Trump, he went for it. Currently, that company has 2 billion in contracts with the federal government, and that is a wall. Whoops. It was immediately climbed by some enthusiasts just to show they can. And who would have thought that building a wall with poles is a wall at all? Well, Trump, I suppose. Interestingly enough, the in order to build the wall, he had to bring in some laws in order to override environmental protection acts. Native American land is in the middle of it, and some other things, people living there. So he created a law that overrides all of that, so he can build said wall, and they started doing it. On the official website, you can see that they have apparently 275 miles built. Well, it's more like 5 miles because 270 miles already existed and there was a pre-existing wall. So they built 5 miles, 4 years. I suppose that's a good average. I mean, gonna be like the Chinese wall in 100 years we got it. Um, there was also some reports of parts of the wall having collapsed. There was some wind last year or this year, so sturdy. Not a requirement, I suppose. So, talking about requirements, well, what would you think a company that is getting billions from the government has? I mean, on such company. Well, apparently not very high. The company who is currently building it, the guy who kissed virtually Trump's butt. Well, the company's owners, the father and the son, have been both sued for sexual misconduct in New Mexico. Had to be settled by 150,000 US dollars. In 2009, they both been arrested for tax fraud. They paid back the money. There are over 2,000 violations and notices from city, counties, and states, as well as other federal bodies, as well as 496 criminal charges against the company since its inception. And to make things matters worse, the former head of the company was convicted for 5 years for child pornography. But I suppose that's grand to give him 2 billion or more. I mean, over the next 100 years. Well, speaking of the violations I mentioned earlier, constructions being taken place without any laws, and well, they are destroying natural areas, they are destroying Native American lands, there have been some explosions taking place to make way for the wall and things like that. But I suppose if you're Native American, you don't expect anything else to happen in your country. Well, least of all with laws written by the Americans. But anyway, that would be the news for today and for what happened this far in August. So have a good one.